Miigwech. Yeah, so we're about to go into some pretty heavy content, or it could get heavy. And we were just talking about how we were going to discuss today and what we were going to discuss. And Storm brought it to my attention that we should do a blunt trigger warning because the topic is working well in trauma. So we might choose to share something that, or one of our own traumas that might remind viewers of their own. So, you know, please make sure that you're feeling good about watching the show. If there's something that does trigger you, please feel free to reach out to your networks. If you need to extend your networks to our network, our email is ccandseith@gmail.com. You know, we're not always going to be able to respond right away. So if you're feeling extremely triggered, please go to your network or, you know, call emergency services. It's going to be personal. So this is the first time I've done a trigger warning. So I'm a little bit, you know, I'm stumbling over it, but it's real, right? So the content's going to be real and you may feel emotions from it. So if you're feeling like that's not for you right now, this is your warning on that. I think I did okay. So the discussion, working well in trauma, the first question we had, and maybe I'll switch back and forth and have Storm ask some of the questions to you just naturally as we work into it. But what's an example of a time that you've worked through personal trauma? And I'm sure that we could just blow it out of the water from there.
Well, I could start with maybe a story of personal trauma that I had to work through. I was really wondering whether or not I was going to share this one, but I think I'm going to be brave today and share it. I was the victim of sexual harassment at work, and I had to work through it. I had actually gone a couple of times through this interaction with somebody I was doing work for, and the conversation, you know, as I'm doing the work, kind of turned to a sexual nature, and at first I wasn't quite sure how to really process it all, so I kind of internalized it, and I think that might be just, you know, a natural response to something like that you know, comes from my upbringing and, you know, everything that all the baggage that comes with that. However, it happened a second time, months after the first, and this was a client that I had been assigned to go and do technical work for, and so I only get to see them every couple months or so anyway. So it escalated from there the next time I went, and the second time that it happened, I spoke up about it after a couple of days of reflecting and talking with loved ones and that kind of thing, and I spoke up about it to my employer, and they got me in touch with the human resources department, and we sat down and basically worked out what it was we were going to do going forward. And long story short, the good news was that I no longer have to interact with that client. The not so good news is we still have that client on contract. However, we have other personnel that goes and takes care of that work, and I'm not 100% sure whether or not that client's office got notified of the incident or not. So I do worry that it's, you know, going to continue for other workers, and I don't know. You know, like after the incident happened, it was I kind of requested a, you know, just not knowing anything more about this client. I don't want to, you know, I didn't want to talk about them any further after, you know, the work after the decisions were made and the ink had dried on that. But yeah, I mean, it's still something that I think about often, and it's something that I hadn't really shared with anybody other than my work and my closest, you know, loved ones until now. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing. It's like, I think when we talk about trauma, I think like we have to like recognize that everyone's approach to talking and working through trauma is different. So for me, I have come to be more resistant into sharing stories and to really having conversations about what do we need to do to have bigger conversations about trauma and in safer ways. So for me, that's working through personal trauma for me. And I obviously counseling and a lot of mental health resources are out of reach for me, and they're more out of reach for other people who have less than me. So one thing that I've come to rely on when working through trauma is oddly workbooks. Um, and I discovered a really good workbook that I have intention to return to and a desire to work through. It's called the Wellness Action Recovery Plan. I think it's more geared towards individuals who experience suicidal ideation or overcoming suicide and trauma, such as that nature. But I find that the questions that they ask, like, this is what wellness looks like. This is what I need to feel well. This is what wellness means to me. And I know it sounds super elementary and like, when I was going through counseling when I was younger, I used to think these workbooks are so stupid. And now I'm like, oh my God, these workbooks are amazing because they ask such simple questions, right? So I think conversations about, how we work through personal trauma and what is necessary to work through that is also an important conversation. For me personally, my trauma is something that I'm still working through. I am lucky and in the sense that as a professional, I have resources that are available to me. They're not resources that are great. They're not resources that are long-term or deal with complex trauma. So when I call them, I have to actually be very direct in the issue that I'm addressing. So for one example is working through personal relationships and having conversations around difficult subjects or setting boundaries with people in personal relationships. I found really helpful to working through personal trauma. One thing that I've come to recognize in working through that is for me, is recognizing my body, how the trauma comes out. So for me, it's anxiety, and it's feeling like my stomach goes to the bottom of my body and everything else just goes out. And I know that at that time that I need to do things to prevent it from going out, like to prevent it from spiraling out. And I think that's sadly just me having to work and to survive through many personal trauma without a lot of support and working to find things. And I think that we need to recognize that not a lot of people will have the resources or the capacity to think through those things. I just thought them through because I was like, I don't want to deal with this bullshit anymore. So working through it is something, a conversation that happens and needs to continually happen. So that's why I'm so happy we're here, because like what does that mean, and what does it look like, and how does it look like for people? And maybe it's a scented candle, or maybe it's a workbook and asking questions like, what is wellness?